This week we'll be starting on Module 2 in our textbook. In this chapter, we'll be first talking about the conjugation of regular first group verbs, that is, verbs that end in ER, and how to form the negative. To start off with, let's review the subject pronouns in French. Remember, a subject is something that acts upon a verb. A pronoun is a small word that takes the place of a noun, which is a person, place, thing, or idea. So if I want to say, for example, the dog eats the shoe, but I want to replace the dog with a pronoun, I would use she. She eats the shoe. She is a subject pronoun. The subject pronouns in French are je, which means I, and can be truncated to J apostrophe when the word comes before a vowel. Tu, which means you. This is the informal and singular you. Il, which means he. Elle, she. On means one. And the French often use this to mean we, like one eats pasta at an Italian restaurant. Nous, we, and that is the plural of je. Okay, if I'm in the group, then it's we. Vous is you, plural or formal. But if there are lots of informal yous, tu, then together it makes a group of vous, you guys. Il, they, which is either masculine and plural, or it can also be a mixed group of masculine and feminine things. And elles, they, which is a group of feminine plural things or people. Okay, so let's talk about verbs. The verbs we're going to talk about today are verbs that we call the first group of verbs, or sometimes they're called ER verbs because the infinitive ends with an ER. The infinitive is the form of verb where you haven't done anything to it yet. You've not conjugated it, okay? This is the infinitive right here. The infinitive is always to, T-O, something. In this case, to like, aimer. To conjugate the verb, you take off the ER, and then you add the appropriate endings that match the subject pronouns we just talked about. For je, you're going to take off the ER and instead use just an E. For tu, you'll take off the ER and instead put an ES. Il, elle, and on in the singular, take off the ER and just use an E. For nous, you'll take off that ER and just use ONS. Vous, EZ, and il and elle plural, ENT. So you may notice that I have some of these in brown. We call ER verbs, or first group verbs, boot verbs. That's because everything in the brown sounds the same. Let me show you. J'aime, tu aimes, il aime, elle aime, on aime, ils aiment, elles aiment. For the M part, all of these in the brown sound the same. One thing you will notice that's a little bit different is that over here with the plural il and elle, we do pronounce a little Z sound between the verb and the subject pronoun. That's called a liaison. Ils aiment, elles aiment. The last two to practice pronouncing are these two. Nous aimons and vous aimez. And you'll notice that again, we pronounce the liaison between the S and the A that follows. So, to repeat, j'aime, tu aimes, il aime, elle aime, on aime, nous aimons, vous aimez, ils aiment, elles aiment. Let's look at another example. This is the verb parler, which means to speak. Je parle, tu parles, il parle, elle parle, on parle, nous parlons, vous parlez, il parle, elle parle. Again, everything in the brown sounds the same. Parle, parle, parle. They're all the same. Nous parlons, vous parlez are the only two that are pronounced differently. However, notice that the endings here are exactly the same as what we had with aimer. I for je, is for tu, I for il, elle, and on, ons for nous, ez for vous, and ent for il and elle. Now, just as with être, you cannot change the verbs around. You can't change them around here either. You can't, for example, take the parlons form and stick it over here with tu. That would sort of be like saying we is talking instead of we are talking. Let's look at some examples. Tu parles espagnol? Do you speak Spanish? Excusez-moi, madame. Est-ce que vous parlez anglais? Excuse me, ma'am. Do you speak English? And elle est française. Elle parle français. She's French. She speaks French. Encore des exemples. J'aime le chocolat. I like chocolate. Tu détestes les escargots. You hate or detest escargots, snails. Elle adore la musique classique. She loves classical music. Nous visitons Paris. We are visiting Paris. Vous regardez la télévision. You are watching TV. Or, ils étudient le français. They study or they are studying French. Which brings us to our next important point. The present tense in French can be translated several ways. The sentence Je parle français in French means three different things in English. Je parle français means I am speaking French, but it also means I do speak French, and it also means I speak French. All of these English phrases boil down to one phrase in French. Some verbs, for example, aimer, adorer, détester, can be followed by a second verb in the infinitive. For example, j'adore écouter la musique. I love listening to music. Nous aimons dîner à Chandler's, en centre-ville. We like to eat or dine at Chandler's in downtown. Elles détestent regarder la télévision. They hate watching TV. Now, in English we do something similar. I like to listen. We like to eat. They hate or don't like to watch. Remember, the infinitive is the form of the verb that is to, to, something else. To watch, to dance, to swim, to play, all are infinitives. Let's talk next about the negative. To form the negative, we use the expression ne and pas sandwiched around our verb. For example, je ne parle pas anglais means I don't speak English. Tu ne visites pas Paris means you don't visit Paris, or you aren't visiting Paris. Il ne regarde pas la télévision. He's not watching TV. If the verb starts with a vowel or an H, we make a contraction, and instead of putting ne, we put an apostrophe before the verb. For example, je n'aime pas les escargots. I don't like escargots. Vous n'utilisez pas le dictionnaire. You don't use the dictionary. Or, elle n'habite pas à Boise. They don't live in Boise. This finishes our first lecture for Module 2. See you in lab.